Okay, it's time to commit. 2024 is the year for prioritizing yourself. Begin your new smile journey with Byte, and you could start seeing results in just 2 to 3 weeks. Just order your at-home impression kit today for only $14.95 at Byte.com. Byte Clear aligners are doctor-directed and delivered to your door. Treatment costs thousands less than braces. Plus, they offer financing options, accept eligible insurance, and you can pay with your HSA FSA. Get 80% off your impression kit when you use code WONDERY at Byte.com. That's BYTE.com. Start your confidence journey today with Byte.
Are you tired of doing the same workouts day in, day out? Well, check out the Peloton app. Wherever you are, whatever your mood, the Peloton app has something for you. Lunch hour power walk, park Pilates, beach yoga. The Peloton app has it all. Try it today. Download the Peloton app and get your first 30 days free. New paid memberships only, starting at $12.99 a month after trial unless canceled. Terms apply.
Acast powers the world's best podcasts. Here's a show that we recommend.
What is The Briefing Room? It's a behind-the-scenes look at how the criminal justice system works and the lives of the people within that system. If you love true crime, well, these are the real people who do the job every day of making sure justice is served. Hi, I'm Detective Dave. I'm Detective Dan. Together, we have decades of experience in local law enforcement, a profession that we think is often misunderstood. So we're going to explore how to do it right, and we won't shy away from when it's done wrong. These are stories you'll hear nowhere else. Unique, frank, and unvarnished. From the team that brought you Small Town Dicks, this is The Briefing Room. Episode 1 drops on August 30th. We'll meet you in the briefing room.
Acast helps creators launch, grow, and monetize their podcasts everywhere. Acast.com.
Somebody please think of the children!
And welcome back to Fresh Wounds, your... God damn it.
What did you think was going to happen, Terry?
I know.
You set us up for failure.
I sure did. Welcome back to Fresh Wounds, your monthly Patreon-only episode where we dig into a movie that I guess I don't even know. Just traumatized us?
Yeah,
is that
deeply
what we're going with as an
affected.
adult?
Touched
Okay.
in a traumatic way.
Yeah.
That's a terrible way to phrase that.
It's out there, though.
I'm Mary Beth. Who am I?
Oh, I'm Terry.
Yeah, I'm Mary Beth. In this episode, I'm very excited for many reasons, but we are covering one of my all-time favorite movies and one that Terry has revisited from not liking. It is Lake Mungo, Joel Anderson's 2008 Australian pseudo-documentary that is one of the best horror movies of the 2000, like our current century, in my humble opinion.
It's okay.
I know you're just trying to get a reaction out of me.
I am, it's true.
It's not like I've written thousands of words about this fucking movie. It's all I think about.
And that thousands of words is somewhere back here on my shelf. One of these shelves over
I wrote a
here
really
has
cool
it.
essay for the Second Sight cinema, or Second Sight Blu-ray release. I wrote an essay for the booklet, so this movie is very, very special to me. And I'm very excited to talk about it with you, because you didn't like it the first time you saw it, which made me sad, but I respect it. But you wanted to revisit it for this episode, and I'm very excited to hear about your experience the second time around in perhaps a better headspace for the movie.
Yeah, so we just recently had talked with Kyle Edward Ball, the director of Skinamarink, the writer and director of Skinamarink, and he had brought up this movie on the podcast, and I made a comment that I thought it was kind of boring the first time I watched it. And honestly, And then I had Tony Kaufman reach out to me through a DM saying that we're no longer friends. Goodbye. And I feel like that's the same vibes that were coming off of my co-host at that time. But so here's the thing. When I remember that whole series of films that were coming out, the After Dark films.
The best. Fucking loved those movies at Blockbuster / on demand on like old Verizon and Comcast cable boxes. Like I knew that shit was gonna be like either really good or really bad with that like whole border around it.
Well, and that's what kept me away from it was that there's like these 8 films that
films to die for.
8 more films to die for, or something like that. And the art around it was always very like suggestive, like it was like naked women bodies with like some kind of monster holding on to it or something. It just never seemed very interesting to me. And I know back in 2010 was the one that had Lake Mungo, but it was also surrounded with movies like Zombies of Mass Destruction. Granted, I've never seen any of these, so I don't know. Maybe they are good. But like a bunch of movies that just seemed not the greatest in terms of like the title. And so that was going for me originally, and that's why I didn't initially see it. I also kept getting that one confused with Lake Eden.
Okay. Yeah, that's fair. And they're both in
terms of the title?
Or is Lake Eden Australian? I don't think it is. I think I'm thinking of another crocodile movie. Okay, never
UK.
mind. Thinking of another giant crocodile movie in
Wait, Eden Lake is a crocodile?
No, never mind. Not Eden Lake.
Eden Lake. I was thinking. I said Lake Eden. Or we were just all over the place.
Thread.
I said Lake Eden. It is Eden Lake. But I got those two confused all the time. And I think Eden Lake is
fucked up.
Yeah, that's what I've heard. But I have not seen either of those, and so I got those confused. And then over time I kept hearing how Lake Mungo is the scariest film ever, so terrifying, so scary. And so I seeked it out, and I didn't know really anything about it other than it was the scariest movie ever. And so I sat down to watch it, and I was kind of bored.
Okay.
But it was because I was expecting one thing and got something completely
So I get
different.
that for sure. I think like a lot of people have had that kind of similar feedback with it, where it was like, I thought this was going to be something like kind of a cheesier, grosser indie horror release. 'Cause that was like, After Dark, they put out like Frontiers, which is a new French extremity movie. So like
Right.
some of their films were pretty good, but a lot of them were, as someone who like watched a decent amount of them, I think, like when I was younger, like in middle school and high school, like they were like mid kind of movies. And so I actually saw Lake Mungo because I was babysitting. I like had the most fucking like weirdly detailed memory of the first time watching this movie. If we want to jump into that now. Okay.
Yeah, let's do it.
Oh, this is so fucking weird. So I was babysitting my mom's high school best friend's kids, and this was when they were all babies. And I remember exactly where their house was. It was right near my dad's old apartment that he had with his second wife, and next to like a rib restaurant that my mom used to work at. Like very weirdly specific memory. Yeah.
Very specific.
But I remember like putting these kids to sleep, and they were impossible to get to sleep. But they lived like where they lived wasn't super like isolated at all, but it was very quiet, and they had an old house, and it was very creaky. And of course, as a babysitter, I was like, well, I'm going to watch a horror movie on demand because why not? Like, go through all the free shit. And I knew where all the free horror movies were, like all like hidden in like the crazy VOD menus that we used to have. Like, do you remember that time? Like, isn't that like weird that was the way that like you had the on-demand button, and then you would look through everything that was available in the channels you subscribe for, like whatever. But I knew where all the free horror, like FearNet and all that stuff, like I knew where all that stuff was. And this was in one of those categories that I can't remember. But I was watching a couple of these After Dark ones because I was curious. And I clicked this one, and I was like, oh, okay, it's like a ghost movie. Cool. And I watched it and was just like shocked. And I legitimately thought it was real for like a hot minute. Like I thought it was real.
Okay.
Because, so the way this movie is filmed, it's a pseudo-documentary, like I said, which is basically a mockumentary, but with horror. And basically it mimics like a true crime show after school special that you would see on TV. But it's all fictional, but it presents itself as true, which is a huge reason why like a lot of things I focus on with this movie. But I was convinced because this was before I had seen like, I think I had seen the Blair Witch Project at that point, but I hadn't seen a movie that was like presenting itself as fact. Not like a best in show that's obviously a joke, but like a horror movie that is presenting itself as like an illusion of truth. And it fucked with my head. And it has been my favorite movie, like one of my favorites since like high school. I have loved this movie, and it has always been like a very specifically wild cinematic experience I had like in the dark babysitting at my mom's best friend's creaky old house when her kids were very small, and just like getting the absolute like shit rocked out of me, because it was also the first time I think I'd experienced a movie that made me so sad and also so scared. This was a new experience in terms of like, especially because I'd already been watching horror for a bit, but hadn't really experienced the kind of like deeply sad horror. This was also, I think, my first time experiencing that kind of emotion with a horror movie, like so deeply. And I think that's also why it had such an impact, because as we have all heard on this podcast a million times, I love being sad and scared at the same time. So this movie is kind of, I think, like one of the reasons why I like that. So yeah.
Okay. So two thoughts came in my head while you're talking. And the first one is that this is basically like your Blair Witch for me. Because for me with Blair Witch, when I went to go see it, I thought it was real initially. And so there's that aspect to it. And that was a rocking experience back with Blair Witch for me, because I was like, I had never experienced something that was like that was being presented initially, at least, is real. So there's that. And then the other thought that I had was this is also like The Orphanage to me, where The Orphanage and Pan's Labyrinth opened up the idea that horror movies could give a different emotion rather than fear or revulsion or something to that nature. It could also make you immensely sad, and it could be about things other than just trying to scare the shit out of you. And so I think it makes sense to me that this movie, if this is in particular, if this is your like first time experiencing that kind of stuff in horror, that would be incredibly affecting, particularly as a teenager.
100%. I think now that I'm thinking about it, I was like almost out of high school, but I was still in high school. I was just thinking about the days, like what that lined up was. But that is exactly it. And it was even weirder too, because with like Mungo, like it was like I fucking found it on demand. Like this was not, and this was like obviously the internet was a thing, but I hadn't found like the niche really. Like I like kind of lurked on bloody disgusting message boards, but was too scared to ever talk. Remember message boards? I
do.
But yeah, like it was something that also felt cursed to me, because I couldn't talk to anyone about it, and it was something that I was like, wait, is this real? Is this for fucking real? And like, I can't remember exactly the order of operations. Like, I could have Googled it, like when I got home or something, but I think I didn't have a smartphone yet, so like I couldn't look it up. So I was like, this is definitely real, and I think I kind of wanted to believe it was real too. I think part of me was like very easily swayed. We all know I'm easily swayed into believing into shit. I love just like believing it. Like, so, you know, me being like, it's sick, it's real. And then obviously I found out it wasn't, but I think it felt, again, cursed. Like I found something weird hidden in the on-demand menus of my mom's friend's Fios cable box, like something really weird. And that was what it felt like. Like I found something fucked up. And I know it's not like in the grand scheme of things like fucked up, but it felt so real, and like I was like felt like I was in this family's life. It was like, ugh, this is really strange.
So when you watched it the first time and you were babysitting, did it affect you at all the rest of the night?
Like creaks
do you remember?
And shit. I was like, I turned lights on, I'm pretty sure. I was already pretty jumpy as a babysitter because I had watched so many horror movies, so like I was already kind of like new, but their house was like old home that like definitely could be haunted, maybe kind of situation. Like it was old and kind of rickety, and dark. And so, yeah. And the street was dark too, even though it was like not in like a super, again, isolated area. I was just like sitting up straight the rest of the night, just like scared to pee kind of situation.
So what about this movie over everything else keeps bringing you back to it? I'm curious.
So I think one of the biggest things is every time I watch it, I get something new out of it. Like this time, I really kind of focused on motherhood and depictions of motherhood, which I hadn't really thought about before. But I also think it's one of the smartest. It's one of the smartest horror movies, and I think also more specifically one of the smartest like found footage movies out there, and how it layers different kinds of evidence. Because, and I say like, it's one of the most successful in fooling you, I think. Like, obviously, it's fake, but I think it does a really good job of doing things to fool you in a way that we hadn't really seen before this. So, like, movies like The Last Broadcast, which was a 1998 found footage movie about the Jersey Devil, is kind of presented like this a little bit in terms of, like, you have evidence you're presenting before another narrative. But I think what Mungo does so well is it takes, like, okay, we have footage someone else captured, footage another person captured. We can like cross-examine evidence. We have news reports. We have all of these eyewitnesses. We have a psychic's documentation. Like there's so many like what I call layers of media going into it that like found footage is usually one camera and there isn't a lot other evidence. But this one, it's like it's building a case. And it's such a convincing case that even though it's not real, it fucking really looks like reality really well. And I think a lot of found footage movies, especially in this time period, were all about like Cloverfield and Paranormal Activity, like very much like one camera, like very kind of objective, like an objective perspective, while a subjective perspective, while Lake Mungo feels more objective, if that makes sense. Because it's being presented with so many different kinds of footage. It's not just a singular perspective or like a singular camera's perspective, but rather like an amalgamation of evidence. And it's just so smart in how it does that, and so smart in how it does the bait and switch, which we'll talk about, and also really smart in how it subverts expectations of, oh, this is just a sob story after school special, and then you're like, whoa, shit, she saw her own ghost, like that kind of thing. You got me on my shit. Like, this movie is so cool, and I'm like, it's just, I wish Joel Anderson like existed anymore. He kind of just like fell off the face of the earth after this movie and never made another movie. He did see the release of the Second Sight release though and was happy with it, but he like definitely like just kind of vanished off the face of the earth.
That's a shame because this movie, rewatching it now, I think this movie is really good, and I think what you were kind of talking about this a little bit, but what I think the reason why I appreciated it a whole lot more is that since this came out, I've seen a lot more true crime stuff, and the format this movie uses, so many things that have come out since then have used the same exact format. You're talking about how it kind of layers in different evidence, how it's building its case. Well, that's what a lot of true crime things do. It wants to like provide all this data. It comes with, like, if this were a series, it would every single episode would end with like a cliffhanger of like, oh, the kid is doing it, or oh, this is happening, or oh, this is happening. Like it has all of these little cliffhanger moments that will try to pull you into the next sort of evidence that it's laying out for you. And having seen a lot more true crime stuff since this movie, it feels like, and I don't know if this is just the standard true crime like narrative format that things before this happened like that, but for me, this reminds me of like the kind of starting point for what we're seeing today in terms of like the true crime docuseries or documentaries, the Stare, the Jinx, all of these kind of things that are about crime that wants to present things in a very cinematic fashion. This movie was doing back in 2008, yep. It seems like. And so watching it now, and so I also want to go back on the point you said about you get something new every time you watch it. I saw this that one time. I remembered very little about it other than I remember I remember a couple scenes of like, well, it's ultimately the son walking across the camera footage. I remember some of those camera moments, but like I didn't remember a whole lot more about this film. And so watching it now, found myself more involved in the structure of it, to a point that I was like, this is really smart.
I'm so glad you feel that way. I'm so glad. And again, like, okay, I joked about being mad at you. I obviously understand. This movie is very quiet. It's slow. It's quiet and slow. But I love that shit. And I understand that it is kind of like, this is another movie where you watch it and you're either like really into it emotionally and you're like, what? Or you're like, this is not for me. And I get that. But I'm glad that you rewatched it and liked it. That makes me very happy.
Yeah, me too. And like I said, I honestly think that it's because since then I've seen a lot of content, movies, docuseries, whatever, that follows this same format. And I was like, oh, this makes sense. This is smart. This is a lot smarter than younger me would have given it credit for.
Well, yeah. It is really smart. And like, I mean, how do we want to start tackling, like, how do we like want to start diving into this movie? Because I guess now we should just like get into the meat of it, and I can talk more about some of the stuff that I really love. Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, right off the top, it opens up with, quotes from Alice talking about how something bad has happened. It hasn't reached me yet, but it's on its way and it's getting closer. And we have that kind of ominous opening mixed with talking about people making up stories about ghosts or whatever to make themselves feel better. And that line right there, I think, is so intrinsic to what this movie is kind of about, in terms of both the family trying to cope with the loss of someone and thinking there's a ghost there, that there's something there, to being, and we'll dig into this a lot more as the kind of the complications arise, or the facts get kind of muffled. But it ultimately goes back to this idea of wanting to believe in ghosts to help make you feel better about passing on. But then, as we get to the end, realizing that maybe that's not what's happening, but it is happening in some way. I don't want to, we'll get to that in a way, but
it does.
I love this opening.
It sets expectations, I think, for you to kind of be like, okay, so I know where this is going. And then it's like, actually, no, you don't, like, at all. Yes. So then you kind of like get the background about like what is like who these people are and who this family is. So the Palmer family, they live in Australia, and they're talking about their family. And Alice, the sister, there's the mother, father, and then Matt, who is the son, who was the younger brother to Alice, who has passed away. And they're kind of talking about her as a person. And we're kind of starting to get maybe like a little bit of an idea about who Alice is / who they think Alice is, which I think is very important here. We start off hearing about Alice as one character, and we kind of learn more about her as the film progresses.
And right away, we have like a mix of different techniques going on here, because we have like footage, we have interview footage of the family, we have video that's recorded the day of the accident, we have silent footage of the family while the sort of police operator is on the line, where June is calling in about her daughter Alice. So we have like all of these different layers of media that is telling the story, as opposed to just a talking head, or opposed to like just seeing one type of footage. We're getting a lot of mix of media.
Well, and it feels like, again, area. Like the opening like sequence before a true crime documentary, like giving you kind of like flashes of what's to come. And again, like using that format that we're so familiar with, of getting kind of like the taste of what's happening and like all of the things we're going to see, and like getting us ready for the format and getting us kind of primed for what is going to come next. Again, like it's setting up the expectation, like it's setting you up to be like, okay, this is this one thing. And I think it does a really, really smart job of this. And again, like mimicking what we would watch in any kind of like 60 Minutes, like especially this era, like true crime show, any kind of like talk show, even like a ghost hunting show that you would see on like a sci-fi channel, travel channel. like the kind of setting up the story of what is to come, and it feels like a little bit melodramatic, I think, too. And I think that melodrama that feeds on that in a really interesting way. But yeah.
Yeah, and I remember when I watched it both the original time, because I had this memory after I saw this, because I had the same thought as I was rewatching this now, and again on rewatch, because it's been a few years, I was like, I don't remember what's going to happen. I don't think she's dead. And that was my initial thought. And then we immediately get, like, the movie just gets rid of any of that kind of thought by saying that, you know, the divers find her body out in the dam almost immediately. And so we have, like, this body. We're given shots of it, which are horrifying.
Like, that to me is so like, that is one of the, like, I think, again, like, this sets up, like, we're not afraid to show the grisly side. This is a teenage girl, and we see her waterlogged body, because what happened is they went on vacation. They were she and her brother were swimming, and she drowned. They couldn't find her. There's this huge search for her body, and they finally find her body. And bodies that have been in a body that has been in a body of water for a long period of time is not going to be a very pretty one. And they show the full face, like, it's terrifying. Like, that is a very, like, haunting image, and it's presented like a crime scene photo. It's not like a beautiful dead female body, but it's like a dead fucking female body, which I do appreciate. They don't try to do, like, the whole, like, hot dead girl kind of shit that a lot of horror movies like to lean into. Mm-hmm. But we get this image of, like, and I think, and this is addressed a little bit later, when ghostly things start to arise, but giving you very much visual proof that this girl is dead. Like, she is not missing, she is not disappeared, she is very much objectively, why am I having a hard time with that today? Objectively dead. Which is important to think about, to remember. She's dead. Yeah.
It really is. Well, and we also get kind of the first a bit of subjectivity in this, where June didn't want to remember her daughter in the way of a bloated, rotting corpse that's been underwater. And so she does not go look at the body, but her husband does. Yep. And that becomes kind of like a point of contention a little bit later on. I love the little details that this adds to, because there's this little moment where the car gets stalled on the way back, and the only gear they could get it into was reverse, and so they drove all the way to town with reverse. It's such a small little moment that has nothing to do with the plot, but it kind of sets the feel that this is a real thing, that this is something that would happen to you. That, like, of course my car on the worst day of my life is going to stall, and I'm going to have to drive it in reverse all the way back to town. Like, it's such a small little throwaway detail, but it adds to kind of this collage of painting this very realistic picture of a family dealing with immense trauma. And that's something
that I love about this movie, is that it's not just about the events, it's not just about the traumatic event, and it's not just about the ghost or, like, whatever's going on. It's about the process of grief, and that the grieving process is incredibly different for different people. And grief is such a ridiculously weird, subjective, and got it in one experience, that, and I think that especially in these opening, like, first 20 minutes, we really do, like, they really tell us exactly what's happening. The dad just goes right back to work and is like, I just can't focus. Like, I can't, like, be thinking about this. I need to pour myself back into work. Like, one of his colleagues is even like, yeah, he just went right back to work. The mom can't sleep because she's having horrendous nightmares, so she's going on walks, and she's going into people's houses as a reprieve from her own life, which is the fucking saddest thing I've ever heard and ever will hear in a movie. And they don't talk about it a ton, but it's so, I think it's a huge part of how I think this movie deals with motherhood, and, like, and I will talk about that a little bit later, but, like, it was with how this mother, who is later revealed to be a little bit emotionally withholding from her daughter, is grappling with that emotional withholding that she, and, like, her, what she might view as her inability to love her daughter. I think that, paired with hearing about her nightmares and how she's, like, walking into other people's houses to just escape her own fucked up reality. And then we then find out It's fucking heartbreaking. Like,
heartbreaking.
these people are so sad. And these are just normal people. Like, they're just, I don't know, everyday humans. They're not like...
An everyday person.
Exactly.
Everyday
They're
family.
just like your typical middle class, like, white family. And this horrible tragedy happens, and they all are trying to make sense of it. And then we find out that the brother Matt has captured these images of what is potentially Alice. Images of Alice. He's been taking to photography. He's been a photographer. He's always taken video and stuff, but he starts taking photos of one specific composition in their backyard. And one day he takes a picture and it looks like Alice is in the back of the picture. And yeah.
Yeah. One thing I wanted to mention, there's a line that June says earlier on that I think it's such a, I don't know, I think it's such a neat line. It's death takes everyone. It's the meanest, dumbest machine. It just doesn't care. And that line, it's the meanest, dumbest machine, is such a, I don't know, it's such a good line.
It's good.
It's like,
and it's like, it's not delivered in some like epic monologue. It's just given in this interview with her, just kind of her recalling her own experiences. And it's just said so almost matter-of-factly that you're like, Jesus Christ. And yeah, when Matthew captures these photos, there's even a moment where they were like, oh, there was, I think, I can't remember which one of them said it, but they're like, the person interviewing goes, so did things change when you saw these photos? And they were like, oh yeah, like we kind of felt better in a weird way. And it's a little more complicated than that, but they talk about how like, wait, fuck, like, is this proof that she's alive? To the point where they so this is the point where they also talk about like the father says, I saw Alice's dead body, but June didn't because she didn't want to. And so June was convinced that Alice wasn't dead after seeing these images, and the father starts believing he wasn't correct, and that leads to an entire like exhuming her body in DNA testing, like literally unearthing their trauma again to make sure that this was in fact their daughter in the ground. And they had hope. Like, this was all done out of thinking that there was hope that their daughter was still alive. And I think something that this movie does really well in a fucked up way is like gives these kinds of illusions of hope a little bit, and then it's like, just kidding, there's no such thing as hope. And it does it a few times, and this is one of the first times where it's like could it have been some crazy fucked up thing, like a bureaucratic issue? And it's like, nope, sorry, like, just kidding, it's not.
DNA samples, everything says that is their child, and that's yes, when you were saying kind of like adding hope to it, there is definitely a lot of things where this family is desperate to believe in anything. They were desperate to believe that their daughter could potentially still be alive. And so that moment that it's built up and you're in your head, oh my gosh, the body is not going to be her. It's going to be someone else. They just didn't really notice it. There's a potential for her to be alive. No, the movie's like, nope,
well, that's like,
she dead. That is really your your daughter.
It's like gives you again the hope for like 2 seconds that it's like, just kidding, we're not gonna let you let you sit in that for too long. Like, don't worry. Like, and I think that again subverts expectations of what things you see in true crime, where it's like, we're going to draw it out forever before you get an answer. And this one's like, nah, like.
Yeah, and even before we get to that, there's, I mean, you kind of mentioned it with Frederick, the coworker with the husband. Why can't I think of what his name is? Yeah,
Russell.
David is the actor. Russell. So Frederick, who works with Russell, like talking about, that he's sort of a little bit withdrawn, that he's working hard and that kind of stuff. We get Russell explaining the dream that he was having, where he found himself sitting in the chair in front of the dresser in Alice's room, and he sees Alice walking in, going over to the desk, checking a text on the phone, oblivious to his presence. and when he says something, she becomes completely rigid, and I knew she knew that I was there. And then we have June saying that she could hear Russell crying, and then we have Frederick saying, "Yeah, I believe he saw something. Whether it was a ghost or not, I don't know, but I'm sure he saw something." So we have that. We have like Matthew's friend who spent a lot of the nights at their house, and he's saying, "Yeah, Matthew is a little quiet, but he was always quiet. He doesn't want to talk about his mom walking in other people's houses." So we have like all of these things that are establishing this sort of tension and trauma in the family. And then a little bit later, Matthew has all these bruises on his body. And so we have like all these weird things happening, noises in the house, and we're led to believe, the house is either haunted or maybe she's still alive. And then we have the unveiling of the body again that just sort of cuts
well,
any
like
of that
we
kind
also
of
have there's like the images that Bob Smeet seems to have captured, like, to kind of corroborate that there was somebody in that location that looked like Alice. And so, like, again, there's these two pieces of evidence from two very different places that were like, oh shit, like this can't be real that she's dead. And so, like, with those two pieces of evidence, they do the exhume it, and they realize, okay, well, that's a big fucking bummer right there. So what's happening? Like, what is the next kind of, like, maybe logical assumption here about what is going on? And yeah.
I mean, I love this moment because it goes back to what you said before we started digging into the plot, where it is laying out all these different pieces of evidence. And in a lot of true crime stories, it will provide you evidence, but it wants you at this point in particular to be invested in it, and you're coming up with your own ideas about what happened, your own thoughts on what's going on. And so it's almost as if it's starting to anticipate questions that you're going to ask. Like, is she dead? Yes. Is there something weird going on? Well, here's this evidence of the husband seeing something. Matthew has weird bruises on his body. Mom's having nightmares. Like, we're presenting this stuff to you, whether it's factual or not is up to you, but we're presenting it in this initial salvo of, like, trying to get you hooked on the story.
And I also think we're talking about layers. Ooh. We've been talking about layers of media, but I think something that I think even more lends to authenticity here, especially after the dad is like, I wanted it to be another person's kid. Like, I wanted it to be someone else dead and not my daughter. Like, a murder victim, a runaway. And after he says this, they put up pictures of Alice as a kid, as a baby, like baby pictures, like obviously of the actor, but like there's baby pictures. Then there's home movies that they've obviously shot home movies with the actors as a family to use as, like, again, like supplemental material in the documentary that's being made. So there's the home videos of Alice still alive, like with her brother and with her dad, like playing with, I think, like squirt guns, or her dancing in front of the camera. So again, like, it feels real. Like, we've never really seen, like, fabricated home movies that are then layered over top of something about, like, a fictional person who has died. Like, they just, again, are pushing the envelope in terms of how they are replicating reality and what we expect. That it's like, they went the fucking distance. It's not just, like, photos or, like, shots of the desert. It's legitimate, like, home movies that look like home movies.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and there's no like wink to the camera. There's no moment of, like, sort of like letting you in on the joke or the kind of gag. Not that this is a joke or a gag, but kind of letting you in on the inside of it to realize that it's fake. It plays it very dead serious, and I have to commend the actors. They're very good at presenting a very normal family dealing with the extraordinary.
Exactly. Well, and then this is when they start kind of thinking, ghost? And they start talking about, like,
right,
very ghost things, that, like, noises around the house. So you hear it with, like, knocks on the ceiling, footsteps in the hallway. And then Matthew explains, I set up a camera. And what he does is, like, what we see a little bit in, excuse me, like, what similar to what we see in Paranormal Activity with the static cam. And something, again, that we didn't really see for a while. And I think, like, Mungo deserves just as much credit for like kind of putting together the idea of a static camera to capture like horror imagery, because he sets up a camera in the hallway and captures something walking past the camera. And so basically he's capturing paranormal activity on this camera to prove that, as evidence that there's something in the house. And it's super dark. I absolutely love in this movie when they zoom in on like dark, grainy footage, and I'm like, guys, this isn't helping shit. I'm so sorry. Like my one
it does make me laugh a little bit.
Complaint about this movie is when they zoom in on that stuff. I'm like, guys, it doesn't help me to understand what you're trying to show me. Like that is not doing it for me. And
there's like a couple of shots, like I think it was like the Smeat footage where they're zooming in on this figure in the background, and I'm like, this is a smudge. There's
later
how are you could see anything you wanted.
Like, there's a reflection in the vase, and I'm like, I was never ever gonna clock that. Like that is the one moment where I'm like, you've taken me out of it a little bit, because I see absolutely nothing. So like, it's funny when they do like the slow pan in. I'm like, it's just a shadow. But regardless, they seem to have captured something. And this is when they bring in our psychic boy, who I love very much, Ray, who...
Oh, he creeps me out.
I think because I watched this movie a million times, I like kind of got a little bit like more empathetic to him. But he's a weird figure. He feels like a grifter. He like... is a guy who does radio shows and does like psychic readings for people, and he was contacted by Whoa, did I just forget Matthew or June? Shit, hold on. Which one contacted him? Shit ass. He was contacted by, I literally have it next to me, like trying to find who contacted him, because now I really want to know. I didn't write down. Basically, Ray is brought into their lives. He is contacted by a member of the family, and he is kind of like brought in to help them. And he's a personality because he's on the radio. Like, he's not just like some random dude. He seems to be like a personality who's known in Australia. It's not like a random like psychic off the side of the road. He's a expert.
It reminded me, his segment on the radio kind of reminded me of, I don't know if you ever listened to it. I don't know if anyone ever has now, but
oh yeah,
Coast to Coast AM,
I know what Coast to Coast AM is.
With Art Bell.
Hell yeah.
When Art Bell was doing it from like in the 80s up till like 2003. That's what it reminded me of. This like kind of paranormal kind of talk show type talk radio aspect. That's what his character kind of reminded me of. It also made me laugh that he had changed his name from Zoltz because he wanted to be more trustworthy of a name for a psychic. And I was like, you are such a grifter.
I know.
That's my initial thought.
It is. June is the one that approaches him. So June is the one that reaches out for a consultation, and he kind of like hypnotizes her / he like guides her through her nightmares and tries to get her to kind of confront what's going on. And there's this like long sequence where it's
one of the most important
sequences where the mom is watching feels like she's watching her daughter. And it's like kind of like it details her nightmares, her walking through the house. Again, it kind of keep that in mind. And then June is like, yeah, Ray, come on over. And like, kind of typical in the ways we've seen in horror movies before of like the wife kind of getting like, wife getting kind of, even like Hereditary, the wife getting kind of sold a story from a psychic who is like trying to help her deal with her grief. And then she brings him into the house. Husband is like, the fuck?
Always disbelieving.
And then Matthew was really into it. And so they were like, let's have a seance. And it's like, as you do. So this is when it starts feeling like a ghost show, like a ghost hunter show a little bit. Like, it's not like EVPs and shit, but they're doing, they have a psychic, they have a seance, and we have this whole sequence. And of course Matthew's like, let's film the seance.
Gotta film it.
Because once again, we gotta love a kid. Someone who's like, why do you keep filming? And it's because Matthew's just like a little nerd. And you know what? good for him. But we get the seance
Good for him.
the seance sequence, and it's again like filmed evidence, and they're like, oh yeah, like, and it's not the normal seance. There isn't like shaking shit. There isn't like blood falling out of the ceiling and tables and stuff. Like a failure. They call it a failure.
They think it's
Yep.
a failure. They say after an hour they called it quits, and I was like, okay, so this is doing a really good job of keeping it grounded in the real world. Because if this were a lesser film, it would have been like an over-the-top seance moment. But no, it's like nothing happened. We failed.
Yeah,
It
exactly.
didn't
And
work.
then in reviewing the footage, we
But
have this moment again where it's like zooming in like in the goddamn back corner, and this one's a little bit more legible, but it's like, oh shit, Alice is in the back corner of this shot, like lurking. So, and it doesn't look like the hallway footage that they saw before. So the hallway footage that they first shot was just like, it was like a shadow person like going past. This one you can not see her face, but you can see a little, there's like more detail because it's a static figure facing the camera. So they're like, sick, nasty, there's a ghost in here. And, so, my very professional assessment here, but there's
sick, nasty, there's a
but
ghost.
the evidence seems to be building towards paranormal. And Ray is like, I haven't seen a ghost. Like, he uses, I haven't seen a ghost. Like, I don't know what's going on here. Hysterical, of course, that this man has never seen a ghost. And they're basically like, there is, like, this is something weird is happening. Our daughter, my sister, is contacting me. And so they start putting up more cameras. Matthew and Ray start doing all this stuff to maybe capture some evidence, 24-hour surveillance. Again, going full ghost hunter situation.
Full paranormal activity.
We're just seeing like images of this, and it's like getting narrated over. We're not getting like bogged down into it and getting like kind of like the drama of it all. It's more just like kind of matter-of-factly stating the events. It's not a found footage movie where we're watching them put it all together. We're just getting a retelling of what happened, which I think is really interesting. Again, it kind of takes it away from.
Are you tired of doing the same workouts day in, day out? Well, check out the Peloton app. Wherever you are, whatever your mood, the Peloton app has something for you. Lunch hour power walk, park Pilates, beach yoga. The Peloton app has it all. Try it today. Download the Peloton app and get your first 30 days free. New paid memberships only, starting at $12.99 a month after trial unless canceled. Terms apply.
Feeling, because it's grounded. It's not trying to like dramatize or exaggerate the process. It was more just like presenting it. And then I think they call Ray at one point a Rasputin figure, like when the cops find out and the family finds out.
Yes, Sergeant Druin is so skeptical.
They're like, he's a grifter. They're like,
Ray.
he's taking advantage of this grieving family. Like, why is he always there? Like, what the fuck is going on? He's at the birthday parties of Matthew and stuff, and people, and again, like, they do present him like this. There are just like, there's a weird fucking
parasite that's
like
leached
he's
onto
trying
the
to
family.
benefit from their shit and their trauma. And I mean, like, I do love, again, like, this movie isn't trying to glorify anything. It's very much presenting, even though, again, it is like a fictional film, it is trying to present objective truth really well in a way. And that's what's so cool about this, because it's not obviously objective truth, but it is depicting the facade of objective truth really well. And it's really cool.
Yeah, and I would say that the shots of the ghost, and I'm using that in kind of quotations, as we'll find out very soon, but the shots are not presented in a way that is meant to terrify you. Like, it's not like a jump scare. It's not like it's just like, oh, there's someone reflected in the mirror, because there's a lot of like mirror reflections of potentially Alice that we don't see, and it's presented as sort of like a little detail that could be easily missed, as opposed to like a jump scare type thing. And I think that's really restrained for found footage films in particular of this era that are going for that sort of like, we gotta
Exactly.
goose the
Like
audience.
it's not jump scare focus. It's very much the kind of like you have to really be looking kind of found footage thing, and again presenting it as evidence rather than entertainment. And they capture a couple more images, a couple more videos, and then they quickly, as just kind of as soon as they've started talking about, oh shit, there's a ghost here, they move on to the Withers video came out. My favorite, I like, again, a good crossfade from like the dad with this dramatic thing about the Withers video, which would be like would definitely be either a commercial break or like an episode cliffhanger. Yes,
the end of the episode, and then the Withers video came out, and we're like, oh, what the Withers video say? So then we see
this other this couple who were at the dam. That's right.
At the same time, the Smeat photo was taken.
If you remember, the Smeat photo from the beginning was like, oh yeah, shit, that might be Alice. They took a video from the same day, and they discover that in the background of their video, they did in fact capture who might have been in that image, and it is one and only Matthew, our brother,
wearing Alice's jacket.
And like, wearing his jacket, probably more like her jacket, probably mourning and like trying to make sense of like where she drowned. But then it's like, uh-oh. And then we kind of find out that the way that Matthew has been grieving has been through manufacturing his sister's ghost on camera.
Yep.
So we have gone about 42 minutes thinking that something paranormal was happening here. And then it's kind of revealed that Matthew fabricated this whole thing.
Yeah, and the thing is that like it doesn't spend a whole lot of time, to my knowledge, sort of like digging into Matthew's reasons for it, but I think it's really sad when you think about it that this kid is seeing his family fall apart. His mom is obviously walking into other people's homes, trying to escape the hell that she sees herself in. He doesn't want to talk about it with his friend. We have the dad who is just basically, he's becoming the workaholic, the sort of figure that is going to try to ignore everything and just focus on the here and the now and the work. But he is seeing his family potentially detonating on itself. And so what does he want to do? He wants to do something to help keep the thought of Alice alive. And so he creates it. And it's very sad, but it's very subtle in the way that it portrays that, because it doesn't really come out and tell you that, but there's a lot of like, I don't know, environmental clues that you can see to sort of like see why he might be doing this. Yeah, it's like the movie is
subtle, but it's also a little bit obvious. Like if you're paying attention, like this all kind of comes together, but it doesn't say it, but it gives you everything to put the pieces together. And I also have a couple of views, like a couple times watching this movie, and every time I watch this, I think even more that Matthew actually is a little bit creepy. I do think that there might be a very strange attraction to his sister that is not really investigated, but like with him faking the images kind of puts this very weird, because there's a couple shots where she's like, get out of my room, you weirdo, and like he won't leave her alone. And it's not really brought up again, but there is like a very weird tension between the two of them. Like even it's just there's something really unnerving about their relationship that is never really talked about, but there are some more like subtle, not even subtle, but like cues that like something was a little bit, maybe, I don't know.
Yeah, and I kept thinking maybe that, did he kill her? Because he was the last person seen with her, and she drowned. He swims back to shore. He was like, yeah, she wanted to stay out there, so I just let her. But like he was the last person to be there with her alive. And so like I started thinking at this point when I first saw this, I was like, did he kill his sister? Because there is creepy moments of him with that camera coming in her room, and she's like, get the fuck out of here, kind of like it's you're right, there is a definite creepo vibe
and like
here with the way
I have thought about the whole like, did he kill her kind of thing, which we can talk about when we get towards the end, but like there is an interesting like argument that could be made about that, and I'll talk a little bit more about that towards the end. But yeah, like there's something very off here, but all like everyone it's kind of, again, and then again, what's really interesting is, like, you know, the father says things like, when people heard about it, all these people came out to see it, like, new, like, people want to do interviews and stuff, and we don't ever see that media circus. We're just seeing that and that's another thing I really like about this, is we're seeing the family just trying to survive and just trying to live their lives. We're not thrown into the drama of the media circus. We just hear about it, recounted after the fact. We are not, we're not here necessarily for spectacle. We're here to understand and empathize, I think, is maybe like more of the goal with that stuff. And I think that's really interesting in how they, but again, it makes me feel real. Like, of course they got all these people in their fucking house. And when they found out that, like, you know, this was probably, if this was real, it would be a huge sensation in the news. And the fact that, like, and so it really does follow that without having to be all like newsflash, newsflash, newsflash blaring in your face.
Well, it keeps us centered in the family, as opposed to kind of going outside of the family.
Well, yeah, and then
they
start, this is where I really started thinking about motherhood in, like, Mungo, as they talk about, like, June's own...
Okay.
June's, in, like, difficulty, like, letting go, which is, like, not the right word, but talking about how, like, she was having her own, like, really deep struggles with this. And then coworkers, Fredericks was talking about how they didn't have... June and Alice didn't really have a relationship, but they were also very similar. And then June's mother says, I withheld things from my daughter, and I think that she withheld things from Alice. And this whole sequence is kind of trying to look a little bit into June's mental state and look at how she is processing grief as a mom. And I know that, like, we see motherhood all the time and, like, talk about it a lot in horror, but I think this one's a really interesting kind of navigation, because it's not just, it's like we're having other people, like friends and family, like observing and sharing their observations, not just us like making our own kind of assumptions, but actually getting like third party observations about her, which is so, like, again, we don't get that in horror a lot.
No, we even get like that the quote, this was like the end of hope for all of us, but especially for June. She wasn't ready to let Allie go. She just needed to hang on to her a bit longer, and so she was devastated. So we get that quote, and then we find out that June kept herself, and it became clear that was happening to Alice too. So like Alice was keeping to herself, June keeps to herself, and then we find out that Iris, June's mom, like you were talking about, talks about how she couldn't give herself wholly to June, and she thinks that June couldn't give herself wholly to Alice. And so it's like this 3 generations of matriarchs in this family that aren't able to connect with their daughters. Because we don't hear about that about Matthew. We don't hear about any other siblings. We just hear about the relationship with their daughter. And it's such again, another throwaway line, another throwaway moment in this movie, but it feels like it has so much more intent behind it.
I'm just kind of thinking about this now, and that, like, she says, you know, as she got older, especially, June was withholding something from Alice. And that kind of feels like an internalized misogyny kind of thing of, like, as your daughters, like, get older, like, don't give yourself, like, emotionally over, and creating this weird, dynamic between women. And I think this movie, again, does that really subtly, but also has June realizing, like, what she did and regretting it, because she didn't have time, like, she wasn't given the luxury of time to, like, work through her own feelings and fix things with her daughter. She just has to reflect and regret, and that's so difficult. Like, it's so traumatic, and, like, you know, she says things like, I hope she knows I loved her. And, like, you can just infer from those, like, that relationship that she probably didn't say I love you very much to her daughter. Like, verbally say I love you. They probably fought a lot. Like, you know, realizing, yeah, it's a mom-teenager relationship, but, like, but that actually could have been, you know, broken. Like, it is an intergenerational trauma thing that could have been broken, but wasn't. And now it's kind of like, how the fuck do you move on from that? And I think... You
can't, and it leaves an emptiness, because it's like she's unable to get that sort of, like, you could have, like, I have a feeling that after this, if this were real life, Iris and June would probably have like a reconciliation of sorts, and it would just be like this moment of not wanting to lose your daughter because you're starting to realize how short life is. But June doesn't get that. June doesn't get that opportunity. It is taken from her. And it's so sad. And I was when I was watching it, this was the part that kind of, I think, hit me the most, because like I have a very rocky relationship with my parents, but it's like you see this and you see the sort of like things that are left unsaid when you're unable to say it anymore because of whatever happening, like in this case, a death. And it's just, it really adds to that kind of, I don't know, fucked up trauma.
Well, guess what more fucked up trauma we get after this? Oh man, this shit gets fucking nuts. I mean, and okay, so Matthew has gone with Ray on like a journey, whatever, like a trip, weird, whatever. They leave the cameras up just in case. Okay. Well, they capture a little something something on the camera, but it ain't no fucking ghost. It's their goddamn, no, do they capture? Oh no, it's just a neighbor.
This was going back to the old footage.
Shit,
the
you're right.
footage of
Apologies.
the shadow.
They go through old footage and they see something, and it ain't a ghost. It's their old.
It sure as fuck isn't. It is creepy neighbor Brett Toohey sitting in Alice's room 6 months after her death.
What happens here is another fucking reveal, and a reveal that is very much rooted in horror, horrors of reality. There was a creepy man, and they see him in the corner, and they're like, "Why the fuck is he there?" And what they discover is harrowing, that basically Alice, who babysat for her neighbors next door, was filmed having sex with both the husband and wife neighbors. And it's captured on tape, and she has it hidden in her safe, she has a journal, and she has this like evidence locked away, a secret that she never ever told anybody. And they basically reveal that they don't talk to the neighbors, so we don't know the details. They just know that they had sex, and it was obviously, regardless of whether or not it was she consented, it was still rape because she's a minor. Like, still fucking ridiculous and fucked up. But basically they start seeing, oh, Alice had secrets, and Alice was hiding things. So who was Alice? And I think at this point there is this moment of it potentially falling into After School Special. Like, was this girl sleeping around with adult men? Like, you know, like, it could have very easily fallen into the whole, like, she was a loose woman and her parents didn't pay attention to what she was doing, and she was, like, going out there and all this stuff. But it's never presented that way at all, really. It's more just, like, she was babysitting for them, and she was probably taken advantage of, and she so matter-of-factly hid it, though. And this is starting to then, you know, they say at one point, like, this is the reason why bad things happen. She was so withdrawn because she had this secret. Like, she couldn't talk to us because of this horrible secret that she had. And they're, like, you know, reflecting on the fact, like, why this guy was looking for the tape so he could protect himself and all this stuff. And so now we're, again, kind of falling into the whole, like, oh God, did Alice maybe drown herself because she had this, like, deep traumatic thing happen to her that she couldn't share with anybody else. And they fucking film the sex tape, by the way. Like, they show it. Like, nothing crazy, but they, once again showing, like, the lengths they're going to make this feel real, is they do have, like, this fucked up sex tape, like, actual footage that to splice in with the movie. Which, again, makes it feel real, makes it feel like this girl went through this, and what is happening is, like, her recorded trauma for real.
Yeah, and it's filmed so very matter-of-factly, and I think that's what adds to the overall feel of this movie, is that everything is just presented almost like detached.
Yeah, exactly.
Detachedly, like, this is footage, this is footage, this is footage. It's not like trying to be salacious. It's not trying to terrify you. It's not trying to do that. It's just presenting you with evidence. I will say, to briefly kind of move away from this very briefly, just as an aside, this is where the movie even now kind of loses me a little
Oh,
bit.
interesting. Okay.
I'm going to be honest. And it's because of, we have all of these photographs, we have all of this footage that is obviously being poured over by a lot of people, right? And it took them how long to realize that there was someone sitting in that room? Like, for us as the viewer, it's just a passing over. We're focused on that shadow. But if you are that family and you are so focused on it, you don't see that image. And so there's a couple times later on in this where like we see a little bit more photographs of like things where maybe there is an actual ghost in there, and I'm like, how did you not see that before? If you're pouring over all of this footage, how did you miss this? So that is going to be my one big complaint about this, is that it's not exactly hidden.
Yeah.
We're not seeing it because we're so focused on the spooky thing. But if I had that footage, you better believe I'm pouring over every single scrap of it, and I would have seen that person sitting in that chair a whole lot sooner
So
than
my
they
small
realized
counterpoint, because I'm sorry, I'm not. I swear to God, I'm not trying to be argumentative, because I totally get that. I do think that in the footage that they saw Alice. I think that they thought Alice was in that footage, and so they thought that she was in one spot. And I don't think that they maybe were focusing. Again, that's also me just being like, but there's no. I also
like,
understand
I thought about
what you
this
mean,
later
it's
with
it's
like
not that like.
Well, and maybe not this necessarily this moment, but like once we get to the end credits where it's like showing the photographs, and we have like, not to like jump ahead a little too hard, but we have the photo that has been doctored by Matthew where Alice is standing in the backyard, and then over on the right hand side is the real Alice potentially sitting down. I'm like, did you not see this? It's gonna be my only
No.
my only part that this movie kind of falls apart a little bit for me is that when you have these little small details and you have characters that are pouring over them because they want to have some kind of idea that maybe either A, Alice is alive, or B, that Alice is still with them, you're going to see these little moments.
No, that's exactly. That's fair. Fine.
But it's a small little piquant of a critique for a movie that, again, I have fallen in love with a lot more on this watch.
But then we get another fucking twisteroni where we find out that Alice had seen Ray. Alice got his business card and reached out to him to talk about her nightmares and what she has been seeing and experiencing. But specifically, like, can you help me interpret my nightmare and what the fuck is going on? And it's after they find her diary, basically her planner. Her mom sees that and is like, what the fuck? And Ray had never disclosed that he had met with Alice.
I don't believe his thing about, it wasn't a case of hiding something. It was confidentiality.
HIPAA. This ain't HIPAA,
Girl,
my brother. Like,
he
you don't
dead.
have a code
She
of
dead.
conduct. Like, what is wrong with you?
Their daughter is dead, and you are not letting them know. I mean, I could understand maybe not showing the tapes to them immediately, but like, you didn't let them know, hey, by the way, this is really weird. Your daughter came to me like a year ago. Like, what the fuck?
Me a year ago, and
Grifter.
just like feels like she's not in her body anymore, and is like having like very weird potential like premonitions in her dreams. And I think this point here is when I started kind of putting together like, wait a second. Something weird is happening, but nothing that had been presented to us before. This is something that's like deeply weird. Like, it's not just a case of ghost. Mm-hmm. It's like cosmic-y weird, interdimensional? Question mark? Yeah. I've also seen this movie a million times and have theories about that, but like, there is something weird happening here that we cannot conceptualize, and that no matter how much that they have tried to conceptualize it in this movie, it's not comprehensible. And that's being kind of established as soon as we realize she was going to Ray. She was having these dreams of walking through her parents' house.
She talks about standing at the foot of their bed, and the movie shows the footage that we had seen earlier of an apparition standing by the bed of the parents. And so we have this like hint here that, as you said, something cosmic, time dilution, something is going on. Something is either like projecting into the future to try to prevent something, or there's something from the future coming to the past, or there's like all of these, it's like a time dilution paradox here that
and
is
she
happening
says like she
potentially.
feels wet and heavy, and when she wakes up that feeling doesn't go away, and she needs to find her mom. But then when she sees her mom, she's writing it in her diary, and her mom has found her diary and is talking, and it's 7 months before she died, and she's already having these things of like, I'm alone, there's nothing I can do to stop whatever is coming to me. Like, she was basically predicting and seeing her own death, but not really knowing it. Like, she knew it but didn't. Like, she knew that something was wrong, something very bad is happening, and there's nothing anyone can do, but she cannot like conceptualize and like verbalize and understand how she is feeling. She's fucking seeing herself dead and feeling dead. Like, she feels dead. She thinks she like it's, and she's writing about these things. So when all like people wanting to attribute this and that to like her behavior, it's like they don't even know what's going on in this girl's head. Like, you think she's keeping secrets, like you have no idea the secret that this fucking child is keeping from you. It's not right. And there's almost like the neighbor stuff just kind of falls to the wayside, because you're like, it's incidental. Like, it's incidental. Yeah, that happened, but it's not related to what the fuck is going on here. Like, ain't that fucked up? Like, see, people have a lot of things they go through that you don't know about, even as kids, and like that, what seemed important has like kind of gone away and been like, wait, hold on, like, what the fuck?
Well, there's a sense of fatalism to it too, because she says she wrote in her journey, realized there was nothing they could do for me. And it's like that moment of understanding of, and it goes back to the initial line that opened up this movie, where something bad has happened, it just hasn't reached me yet. That kind of like idea that there is something coming. I don't know what it is. It's going to be horrible, but there's nothing I can do about it. And sadly, at this point, there's nothing that her family could do. And it's so fucking sad and tragic.
Well, and I think that
so tragic.
That further continue like that. I think the ending says that a lot. But before we get to the ending, we see phone footage of when she goes to Lake
Mungo finally comes into the picture.
She and her friends go to Lake Mungo, and the parents are shown this like. So at the trip, Alice had lost her phone, and so her parents get footage from friends of that night, and they're kind of like, something must have happened to her at Lake Mungo. Something looks wrong, and at one point there's footage of what looks like Alice like sitting by herself in like a ditch, and so they were like, oh well, it looks like she's burying something. Again, this moment is super unclear, and I'm like, I'll trust you that that's what's happening there, because again, it's very much like dark, grainy 2006 cell phone footage. So like, not
iPhone footage, not this crystal 4K 60 frames per second 120 frames per second type shit that we have now. No, this is like pre fucking iPhone videos,
Sasquatch photos. So they basically see this image of what looks like her under a tree, and they're like, oh, she's burying something, and I'm looking at it like, sure, fam. So like, again, I love this movie. It's just funny when like, yeah, that was happening. I'm like, 2006, sure. So I'll go with it. So they basically decide, oh shit, okay, we're gonna go find the phone. If she buried something there, I wonder if it's the phone, whatever. So, again, Alice is lying to her friends, nothing happened, etc., etc. But, once again, the parents are kind of taking, again, evidence that they're presented and going to figure out what it was. So they go to Lake Mungo, they find the tree, they dig up the shit.
I did love, by the way, that, they go there, it's daytime, and they're like, there's going to be tourists around. Maybe we should go at night. And I'm like, okay, I get that. But also, this is like, okay, this is horror movie 101. You don't go to a place where something traumatic happened, where someone buried something in the dark of the night with your little flashlights. No, you do that in the sun. Tourists be fucking damned. I just loved it. I was like, are you kidding me? We're going to wait till night.
Duh. But so of course they wait until nighttime, normal. And they find in a plastic bag buried was what her dad calls her most precious things. Like she has her favorite necklace. She has her cell phone in there. Buried a bunch of stuff. And so of course they go home, plug the phone in to see what was what. And what they, this fucking shit will haunt me forever. Her own, I have it playing right now just so I can have the visual, and it's just it's her cell phone footage, her walking. It's dark out, and you just see the sand, and it's kind of just all right, cool, another found footage movie. And then she lifts up her phone and she sees something on the horizon. And what is good intercut with this is Ray asking, "Are you scared of dying?" And her saying, "Isn't everyone scared of dying?" And that conversation is happening as she is walking, as she's filming, and she sees is her fucking self. And not just herself, it's her face after she has drowned. The photo that we have seen of her face, that is the image that she is capturing. Her fucking drowned ass body ghost, fucking whatever, is lurking in Lake Mungo. And I can't tell if she's walking toward it, or it's coming towards her, or they're kind of meeting each other in the middle, but her ghost premonition body gets in her face.
It reminds me of
when it takes your camera and you're
the ghost. That's what it reminds me of. It's that moment of just getting in your face. No, you might up until this point have believed that none of this is supernatural, but there is a fucking premonition on camera coming at you, and it is absolutely terrifying.
And it's
I can't imagine.
No,
can you imagine?
I would shit my
just going to camp,
a 16-year-old girl going to camp with her friends, and is but also has for almost a year been having nightmares about her own fucking rotting body, and she goes. Yeah. And then she sees that, and she's like, well, it's over. I guess this is it. My dead body is coming to find me in places. What the fuck? That is so scary. And that is what is so scary about this movie. And I think if you are willing to give yourself over to this movie, and you kind of come to the conclusion with this movie about what was happening to Alice, it wasn't just some ghost stuff. It wasn't just the creepy neighbor. There was something bizarre happening to this girl, and there's no fucking reason why it was happening. She was just chosen as this weird and stuck in some weird, I don't know, cosmic thing. And again, we can only kind of inference this, but it does feel very kind of cosmic horror-y, interdimensional horror-y, because again, she's having these dreams. Time seems to be diluting and expanding and becoming one and slapping together. And again, and at the end, especially when we hear June and Alice, their interviews with Ray overlapping with each other, as June is they're moving out of the house, it all kind of comes together in this weird thing of wait, this was predetermined. There was no avoiding this. So even if Matthew did kill her, she was going to die no matter what. And I do think in rewatching it, some of these videos of Matthew being weird aren't timestamped, or her reactions to Matthew aren't timestamped. So I don't know if maybe she had her own feelings that he was somehow related and he was trying to distance herself from him. But I don't think I would think that if, just because this movie is so smart, I think if the movie wanted us to think that, it maybe would have driven that home a little bit more, maybe. I don't know. But yeah. Regardless, she was gonna die no matter what.
I am curious, why do you think she hid her phone?
I think...
Do you have any thoughts on that?
They called it a ritual, but I think my thought was that, my initial thought seeing this was it scared her so much in what she captured that she wanted to bury it so she wouldn't ever have to see it again. And it'd be hidden away. But then she buries it with a necklace and stuff. So it's not just her phone, and it becomes like almost a symbolic thing. And maybe it's like she captured that image. She kind of is like, it's almost her closure. So she takes all of the things like that are symbolic to her, plus that kind of actual documentation, and maybe like buries it as like an act of closure for herself. But also maybe, I think they talk about it a little bit, like it maybe was something that she left for her parents to find, to like maybe finally understand what happened. And like, I don't know. And or maybe she's just a 16-year-old and is like not sure what is fully going on, but I don't know. I don't think I have like a full answer. Do you have one? Tell me. Oh, I was like,
no,
tell
I
me.
don't.
Or what are your thoughts about it?
No, I really have no thoughts on this. Other than the idea that maybe it was like you capture something and you're like, I don't want to think that this is a thing, and so I'm going to bury it
But the other
and
thing
ignore it. Is like the only thing I could think of. But I'm like,
so
why would you
my other
hide it
thing
with
then,
everything else?
I guess my thought that just came to me is like maybe giving those precious things is like a sacrifice. She thought of like, if I give it my most beautiful precious things that I love, that like a 16-year-old thinks is love, it will take that, and that will suffice as like a sacrifice, an offering. That could also be part of it, like an offering to something to hopefully like to feed it or get it away from her. And then the phones just be like, I don't ever want anyone to see this ever again.
Yeah, I mean, I honestly, I can't imagine coming face to face.
Your own goddamn
with
ghost.
a dead
Yeah,
version
your
of
dead
myself.
body.
Like I don't know how I would react to that. I probably, if I was filming that, I probably would have just thrown my phone away. I'd be like, well, nope, we're done. We're going to ignore that this night.
I would also just be like, all right, cool. I'm just gonna like cease to exist. Like I'm just gonna like explode into a puff of smoke and just.
It's that parrot from that I've mentioned a couple times from that Monty Python thing. That parrot is no more. It has ceased to be. That would be me. I would just cease to be.
Exactly. And so they find this, and then it's kind of like, oh, something weird happened. And they, yeah.
Well, and even Matthew says, I think she recorded the future coming to get her.
And like the dad was like, I think she saw a ghost, whatever
Cosmic.
that means. Like, they kind of seem to realize they're not going to fully understand what's happening. It's time to move on. And they start talking about how they're moving from their house to somewhere new to get a fresh start, because they're starting to put the pieces back together in their family. They're starting to finally heal, and it's time to kind of like fresh start it. And this is where they start again playing Alice and June's interviews with Ray over each other, and it's
so good.
It's just like best ending of a horror movie ever, because it's June's final consultation, and it kind of brings everything together in a really fucking sad way in terms of like how these things were intertwined, and there was nothing anyone could have kind of done to unravel that.
Yeah, so there's like this like made me really sad on this watch for two reasons. One is this idea of fatalism and fate, and the idea of like future and the past and the present all mingling together in some weird cosmic mumbo jumbo. But then also one of the things that you kind of touched on, Mary Beth, this entire episode is the idea of motherhood and everyone being and failing each other. And here we have two conversations that are just barely missing each other. They're missing each other in time, because this happened with Alice back with Ray, and then in the future, like they're missing each other with time, but they're also missing each other with intent. And it goes back into the same issues that it plagued the mother and daughters of this family, at least 3 generations of people not talking to each other or passing each other in conversation. And so we have June's conversation, and then we have Alice's conversation, and they are just missing each other. They're both sides of the same equation, but both of them are missing the other side of that conversation, just like is happening with June and Alice, and also with Iris and June. It's such a masterful, but again, subtle. They don't bring your attention to it. It's just it's just this moment that like builds once you start to like close read what is happening in this movie.
It's really
And it's sad.
Because again, it's like Alice says that she's watching her mom, but her mom doesn't know that she's there, and it's kind of like, and then Alice, like, they're not perceiving each other in the same time or same time in the same space. And I think what hits really hard with this ending to me is that, like, the family does kind of get closure a little bit, but Alice is kind of stuck. Because I think with this final shot, we see them in front of the house, and there's Alice in the window. It's like, you know, I see the image, like the last image of this family in front of the house before they leave, and Alice is in the house. So they're outside, but she's stuck.
Right.
And like,
well, and even before we get to that, we have Alice saying she's gone, she's going now, she's leaving the room, and that's interspersed with June leaving the house for the last time, and everyone's packing up and leaving, and then she's gone as June leaves, and so it's like this realization that they're leaving, but as you were just saying, like Alice is still stuck there.
Alice knew that she was going to be left behind, basically, and it's a really interesting way to look at grief, an interesting like perspective on grief that you don't see a lot, because you see people like, okay, like healing and moving on, like, you know, very reductive terms here, but like healing, moving on, kind of like fresh starting. But like, what happens to the dead? Like, what happens to the dead? And yeah, and like, again, this is a horror movie, but it's like, it is kind of showing the perspective of like, what happens when you move on, but perhaps like the dead person doesn't. And as now we get, I mean, the sequel is Alice terrorizing a family that moves into the house after them. Joke, obviously. But like, we see this, and you can't begrudge this family for moving on. Like, this family has gone through so much shit, and there's no. I say like moving on, and not like in a bad way, and more like they did a lot of shit, and like they did stay together through Matthew lying about everything, and a crazy psychic, and their daughter, like all this stuff, and they're still together as a family, and they're able to move on. But Alice is still stuck. She is kind of trapped in this cosmic trap, and like, who knows what other version of herself she's going to appear to. Like, she is kind of, it reminds me a little bit of The Long Walk, a little bit, like trapped in this form forever, and like trying to help maybe, but also like stuck, and is kind of in a cycle. And again, that's reaching a little bit, but again, that final image I think does kind of show like they have moved on, and it's really awesome, but then she might be trapped, and she's alone. Like, she's alone,
and she's alone. Absolutely alone. And
she can't do anything about it. She just has to watch and silently observe as like the things that she knows. Well,
life passes by.
Like, as things like life passes by, and then everything that she knows and is familiar with goes, like, leave her, and then she's just stuck. Anyway.
Well, and it goes back to the line from the very opening of this movie, where they're talking about how people make up stories about ghosts or whatever to make themselves feel better. And for about, I would say 65-70% of this movie, I feel like that is what's happening here. We have Matthew trying to hold on to the past. We have people trying to believe that there is a ghost happening that might make them feel better, that there is like an afterlife, or that there is something out there. And by the end of this movie, they have rejected that idea. They're like, no, there is no stopping it. We're just going to move on with our lives. But it kind of subverts that expectation of that, because no, the ghost is still there. It's not making you feel better. It's not making the ghost feel better. The ghost is going to linger here and watch as her family basically abandons her. And it's so, the shot of them outside the house, and Alice is in the window looking out at them. She is separated from them both physically but also kind of supernaturally, and she is just forced to watch as her family is going to leave her. And it's like that added little bit of a gut punch of an ending. Followed up with a bunch of like footage of the movie where we see something, but then the ghost is lingering off to the side. It's
like you weren't looking for the right things kind of situation. Like, Yeah. Which, again, I know what you mean, where it's like, how did your ass not see that before?
I mean, because in particular, the one where Matthew had superimposed Alice in it, if you are taking the time to superimpose Alice in the backyard and you don't notice that off to the right is actually Alice, like, come on. that is it. But other than that, I think that the way this movie ends is just a brilliant idea of, like, you are seeing one side of the story, but you're not seeing all of it. And so these little bits of images, as imperfect in a realistic setting as I think they are, kind of plays into that idea of you're looking for one thing and completely missing what's actually happening.
It's a perfect movie. I love it so much. I'm so glad that we talked about it, though. I'm so glad you watched it and that we could do a long-ass episode on it.
Yeah, me too.
Well, everybody, thanks so much for listening to me nerd out about Lake Mungo, and also Terry. Terry got to nerd out about Lake Mungo with me. This was really awesome, and I've never been able to talk about this movie it's so in depth before, so I love it even more now that I've been able to, like, really talk about it. But everyone, give us your feedback. What did you think of Lake Mungo? I know that a few of you have had some experience with Lake Mungo, so let us know. You can let us know on the comment section of this Patreon post. You can send us an email at scarredforlifepodcast@gmail.com, or you can reach out to us on Twitter. I'm at MBMcAndrews. And of course, you know the drill. You probably follow the podcast. Follow them at Scarred Podcast.
Exactly. Yeah, and if you don't, why not? But if you could make sure you are subscribed, as I'm sure you're doing. If you haven't yet, please give us a rating or a review. Join our Discord server. We have a Discord that we're kind of playing around with. And yeah, continue supporting us on Patreon. And we have, like, the next movie that we're going to talk about already decided. But after that, we would love some inputs. What would you like us to talk about? Is there a specific movie that you would like us to do kind of this deep dive into?
Yeah, things that scared you. I know that Terry and I have a list, but we want to hear about what films also terrified y'all, especially as adults, like specifically like recent releases within the last 10 or so years that have really traumatized you as an adult. We'd love to hear it. Thank you to Eric Parr for our artwork. Thank you to Sean Keller for our music. Thank you to all of our lovely patrons for listening to this episode. Stay safe out there, but most importantly, stay creepy.
And until next time.
Won't somebody please think of the children? Won't somebody please think of the children? Somebody please think of the children!
Acast powers the world's best podcasts. Here's a show that we recommend.
What is The Briefing Room? It's a behind-the-scenes look at how the criminal justice system works and the lives of the people within that system. If you love true crime, well, these are the real people who do the job every day of making sure justice is served. Hi, I'm Detective Dave. I'm Detective Dan. Together, we have decades of experience in local law enforcement, a profession that we think is often misunderstood. So we're going to explore how to do it right, and we won't shy away from when it's done wrong. These are stories you'll hear nowhere else. Unique, frank, and unvarnished. From the team that brought you Small Town Dicks, this is The Briefing Room. Episode 1 drops on August 30th. We'll meet you in the briefing room.
Acast helps creators launch, grow, and monetize their podcasts everywhere. Acast.com.